The 2025 Sydney Marathon, the first new world major to be added, the 7-star, and at first I was a little bit on the fence about these new races being added. The 6-star thing about the world majors has been somewhat iconic, so adding new races, I was a little bit on the fence. From a business standpoint, I get why World Majors wants to do this. It makes a ton of sense, and for different regions to have these marquee events also makes total sense. And I have to say, after seeing the Sydney Marathon, a course I'm not familiar with, a race that I've never seen, it was quite iconic. You get a really good view of Sydney, and I think that's one of the best things about these World Major Marathons is they really show off the city. And the Sydney course really showed it off. Now, I talk about shoes on this channel. I don't want to take anything away from the athletes. So Kiros and Hassan's victories, congratulations to them and the rest of the podiums and all of the finishers in the race. But let's get into the shoes because there were a couple interesting things. But before I get into the shoes, we need to talk about the course. This is the Sydney Marathon course. All of that. There is a lot going on. As you can see from the elevation profile, it might be kind of small on your screen, but there is some elevation here. You have a net gain of about 320 meters, but you have a net loss of about 400 meters, which gives you a negative 80 split between those two. But there is some rolling hills in this. But more importantly, look at all of the twists and turns in this course. It is non-stop. You're going out and back, you're going around things, there are those elevations. This is never going to be a fast course because there's just so much going on this course. It's actually quite interesting because the only other course in the World Majors that's kind of like this is the Tokyo course, as you can see here. But I used to think the Tokyo Marathon course was a lot going on. It has nothing on the Sydney Marathon course. It's also interesting that the two courses, Tokyo and Sydney, that are kind of on the same side of the world are somewhat similar. But it's, again, interesting to see a new course in the World Majors. As I said in the opener, it's interesting to see the city. This really showed off the city. They finished at the Opera House, which is the iconic thing in Sydney. It was a beautiful course, and it really did show off the city very well. But as far as racing goes, and this is a race that had pacers, I'm not a huge fan of pacers in races. But again, for the first event in the World Majors, this was the first one with the 7-star. It was not the first running of this course. It was not the first Sydney Marathon. It's been going on a long time. That's how it earned its spot as the 7-star in the World Majors. But again, always interesting to get a fresh course and see something new, and definitely the Sydney course delivered, and I will look forward to how this course evolves with racing over the coming years. Starting with Asics, the Metaspeed Sky Tokyo took the top podium in the men's race in Kiros' feet. As I said in my reviews for this shoe, this is the marquee Metaspeed this year. If you're going to see a Metaspeed on a podium at a World Major this year, it's going to be the Sky Tokyo. This is the one that's just the best execution of all of the technology that Asics has in this shoe. And again, it was good to see this. Now, we have been seeing a few different types of Metaspeeds over the past, I would say, year or so. They've been trying some development models. There's been, I think, some different midsole compounds. I do think there were some Metaspeed Skies and Edges that had the full FF Leap midsole, kind of like the Metaspeed Ray. The shoes that we saw in the Sydney Marathon today looked very stock. They look like the standard Metaspeed Tokyo series that you and I can buy in the stores. And there were a lot of them. Now, Asics is the title sponsor for the Sydney Marathon. Given the region, being based here in Asia, Asics is very popular. It continues down into Australia. So I'm not surprised that there was a big presence for Asics runners, particularly in Sydney. And it was good to see them out there. And it was good to see the new Metaspeed Tokyo shoes doing quite well. But the big question for the Metaspeeds to me is, are we ever going to see the Metaspeed Ray actually being raced? Or is it just an engineering experiment for Asics Engineering to really showcase their technologies? Now, I did find this, an interesting thing in the World Athletics Shoe Checker that I've never noticed before. it says the Metaspeed Ray is not legal until September 11th, 2025. So maybe that's why we haven't actually seen the Metaspeed Ray raced yet. Maybe the other 3 races this fall marathon season, we will see it. Berlin is on September 19th, so maybe we will see it there. I am actually really curious, and this is one of the main things I'll be watching this fall, to see if we see a Metaspeed Ray actually being raced and or getting a podium on an elite runner's foot. If it's not, then we know the shoe really is an engineering experiment. But if we do, then we know it is a serious race shoe. Right now, it's kind of 50-50, so we will see this fall. Besides the big Asics presence at the 2025 Sydney Marathon, Nike was next up. There were a ton of Alphaflys everywhere across the elite field, across just the overall field. There were just a lot of Alphafly 3s on course, and you definitely noticed that. Now, for both the men's and women's elite field, you primarily did see Alphafly 3s, but what's interesting was on Hassan's feet, you still got the Alphafly 3 Dev 16E model, a development model we've been seeing for well over a year from Nike. But what's interesting is that we're still seeing it, because at this point, we're never going to see an Alphafly 3 Elite or any kind of update to the Alphafly 3 that's sold to consumers. Anything they're doing with this 16E model is going to be part of the Alphafly 4, and we should see the Alphafly 4 coming up this fall. Going through the World Athletics Shoe Checker, I did notice this, that the Dev 16E ends in September. It ends before the Berlin Marathon, which is on the 21st. So theoretically, we're either going to see another Dev model, a 17E or something else, or we're going to start seeing Alphafly 4s. I would think they're going to be Alphafly 4s, following how Nike has been releasing the Alphafly for the past few generations. We should see them to appear on Nike Elites, the top Nike Elites feet in these last 3 world majors this fall. There might be a small release of the proto colorway, and then the major release or the bigger release will be early next year. I'm assuming that's what it's going to be, but we should start seeing Alphafly 4s. So with this 16E model, anything they're doing in that, and again, I don't know what it is, it still looks like it's Zoom X PVX foam. The only real cosmetic difference is the outsole. It's a totally different outsole, but it does look like the outsole that we've seen on the Alphafly 4 prototypes, so that's interesting. I bet there's some sort of different geometry. Maybe the air zoom units are slightly different. Who knows what the differences are, but any sort of development that Nike's been doing in this Alphafly 3 Dev 16E is generally going into the Alphafly 4, which we should start to see very soon. One last thing with Nike, it was also interesting and great to see a Vaporfly 4 up on the podium on the men's side, second place. I know the Vaporfly is kind of not the cool shoe at the moment. No one seems to enjoy it, but I think it's a fantastic shoe. And it's a fast shoe, and we've seen it on some podiums now for those Nike Elite runners who prefer the simplicity and the streamlinedness of the Vaporfly. So it's really great to see that Nike really delivered with the Vaporfly 4, gave their athletes a Vaporfly, a current generation Vaporfly that works for them, so they don't need to go back and race in the Vaporfly 1 or 2 or an older shoe. So really good to see, and it's good to see the Vaporfly pop up here and there. Moving on to Adidas, there wasn't a big Adidas presence in either the men's or women's field in this race. They did get third place on the women's side with a pair of Evo 1 V2s, the one with the Continental rubber outsole, but for the most part, there just wasn't a big presence here. Their big show will be in a couple weeks in Berlin. We should see some new product launches, and we will see a big field there. The men's and women's field, the Adidas runners that were there were mixed between the Adios Pro 4 and the Evo 1, I think. I think we were seeing mostly Evo 1s. I don't think they were Evo 2s, but it is so hard to tell the difference between the Evo 1 and the Evo 2. The assumption is the white Evos or the Evo 1 and the silver and red Evos or the Evo 2s, but I do know that there are white Evo 2s out there now. So who knows what they're running in, but it does seem like the Evo 1 is still the preferred shoe between all of the other super shoe options that Adidas are making right now for Adidas runners, which is quite interesting. Adidas has kind of created a Vaporfly problem for themselves. Something I called out about a year ago, that it's going to be really hard to move Adidas Elites off of the Evo 1 because that shoe was just so groundbreakingly different and fast, really geared to an elite. It's going to be really difficult to get them to move off that shoe, and I think we're still seeing that now. And ending on a brand that I don't think I've ever talked about on this channel, Xtep. They got third place on the men's side with their 160X 5.0 Pro shoe. A shoe, honestly, I don't know a lot about. I looked at the specs for this shoe. The one thing that I remember about this shoe is that the foam in this shoe is a supercritical piece of foam, which I don't really know anything about. I've had a few people ask me in DMs and emails what that foam is. I have no idea what that foam is. I actually don't know a lot about this shoe. What I do know is that the 5.0 is a bit of an older version because there's a 6.0, there's a 6.5, there's a 7.0, really kind of on par for Chinese brands where they just try a lot of different things really fast. They have really fast dev cycles and they iterate really, really quickly. But it's interesting to see that the Pro that was actually racing in their shoe chose a slightly older model, and that's, I think, very telling about where the newer versions actually are. And as I said, I really don't know a lot about Xtep shoes, but I do have someone who follows me on this channel. I am sure he will chime in the comments about all of the details that you may want to know about this shoe. So you know who you are. Leave a comment below telling us what this shoe actually is and what makes it so special. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. If you want to support what I do here, check out sagasurunning.com for our merch or click the join button below. Neither one of those options are good for you. Leave a comment, leave a like, because it helps this channel continue to grow, which I always appreciate. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one.